think we're ready to get started. Again, thank you for joining us today. This is the Reading Language Arts QCT for grades K through 2 for quarter 2. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dr. Jill Colmo. I'm one of the coordinators with the Reading Language Arts team. And with me today is Lisa Flores. Lisa, would you like to say anything?
No, I'm just Lisa Flores, and I am an elementary coordinator here with the Reading Language Arts Department. Welcome everyone to our QCT this afternoon.
Thank you. All right, so here is our agenda for this afternoon's session. First, we will go over a review for most of you of our district resources. Then we will talk about the units that are upcoming in quarter 2 for each of our grade levels. We will dig into lesson internalization and lesson customization for Amplify. And then we will share some support resources for you should you have questions during or after today's session. We want to get started by reminding you of our core values. I'm going to go ahead and read them to you. Our core values include effective instruction. Our Tier 1 instruction will yield on or above grade level achievement. Secondly, equitable access and outcomes. All at-risk students will succeed, with equitable access and opportunity. And finally, excellence. We are committed to continually pursuing excellence. Now let's take a moment to look at our learning objective and our success criteria for today's sessions. Our learning objective says, I'm learning about the Amplify units for quarter 2. Our success criteria today will be, number 1, I can locate and understand the purpose of each district document. 2, I can explain what Amplify units and topics will be covered in quarter 2. And then finally, success criteria 3 states, I can identify resources that will help me customize my lessons. All right, so we are going to dig into Curriculum Central at this time in order to meet our success criteria number 1. So we're going to review how to access our documents, our curricular documents. For those of you who might need a refresher, or we might even have some new teachers here with us today. So remember, we are using the Google site Curriculum Central. And on this site, you will find the district's planning documents, including the Year at a Glance, or YAG, instructional planning calendars, IPCs, and clarity documents. Let's review how to navigate this platform. First, you'll access your District Clever account, and there you'll see an icon for Curriculum Central. Once on the page for Curriculum Central, you will click on the Content Departments tab and find Early Learning 23-24. You will click on 23-24 RLA K-2 on the spreadsheet to access your grade level. The IPCs specifically. Please note that the YAG is also linked at the top of this document. All right, so let's look specifically at how each of our documents work together. Here's how the curriculum is broken down. We have a Year at a Glance document, or YAG, weekly focused IPCs, clarity documents, and daily formative assessments through the form of an exit tickets, constructive response questions, and/or checks for understanding, as well as summative assessments for each unit that are housed in All in Learning. The importance of the Year at a Glance, or YAG, is to give teachers an overall view of units, TEKS, reading and writing genres, and grammar conventions that will be covered in each quarter. Okay, here you see we have kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. Now let's take a closer look at how the quarter is broken down on the YAG. For the purposes of today's session, we will zoom in on grade 2. However, each grade level looks similar. What important dates can we find under quarter 2? We find the dates for the quarter, and we also find the unit assessment windows. The assessment window is given, and the assessment day will fall on that week, depending on pacing. The specific day that the unit assessment should be administered is located on the IPC for that week. Please note the unit assessment refers to an Amplify assessment and should not take more than a class period to complete and needs to be completed in All-in Learning. As you may already know, the K-2 IPCs are 2 pages as they contain both the knowledge lessons for each week as well as the skills lessons. Let's first take a look at the IPC for skills. The IPC is a week-by-week document that showcases the day on which the lesson is taught. Some key items you'll want to note are the following: lesson TEKS, learning objectives or LOs, success criteria, and a direct link to a PDF of that day's lesson. The Skills IPC will also contain the PDFs of the student skills readers if applicable. If tricky words are included in the lesson, they are listed on the IPC as well. Now let's take a look at the IPC for knowledge. The layout of this document is similar to the skills document, but also includes the following: a direct link to Bridging the Knowledge, also known as suggested items to support background knowledge, a direct link to engagement activities, a link to the flip book for that unit as well. When clicking on the direct link to the engagement strategies on the IPC, you may have noticed that it took you to the clarity document for that unit. Let's zoom in on a skills clarity document. Here you can see the TEKS for each lesson, the learning objective and success criteria, as well as links to additional supporting resources. Now we'll take a closer look at a knowledge document. This clarity document will again show you the TEKS for each lesson, the learning objective and success criteria, and suggestions for building students' background knowledge and ideas for strategies to engage students. Something else to note is that the comprehension questions for the read aloud are listed on this document. These documents can be used alongside the lesson to help internalize and plan for instruction. Another feature you may have noticed on the IPC is that when there is a unit assessment, there is a blueprint linked for you to view the TEKS that are included on that assessment. The blueprint will show you the number of items for each of the TEKS tested. Additionally, it will give you an overview of the types of questions students will be expected to complete. And that brings us to the end of Success Criteria 1. And now we're going to be moving into Success Criteria 2. I can explain what Amplify units and topics will be covered in quarter 2.
All right, so we're first going to start off with the knowledge units for kindergarten. So just to give an overview of those domains. So first in domain 4, plants, how do they grow? Students are going to explore their own relationships with plants, from consumable fruit to enjoyable flowers and trees, while acquiring a fundamental understanding of the parts of plants, how they grow, and what plants need in order to stay alive. They will be introduced to the concepts of the life cycles of plants, pollination, and photosynthesis, which will lay a foundation for a broader understanding of ecology and the interdependence of all living things. Students will share their knowledge through writing and drawing activities. Moving in to the knowledge unit 5, farms from the ground up. Students will learn about the importance of farms as a source of food and other products people use. In learning how farmers raise and care for farm animals, students may make connections to what they learned previously about what plants need to grow and thrive, and how plants are food sources for some farm animals. Additionally, students will become familiar with the classic story, The Little Red Hen, which introduces the seasonal rhythm of planting, growing, and harvesting. And finally, in the Knowledge Unit 6, Native Americans, Tradition, Heritage, and the Land, students will be introduced to the broad concept that Indigenous people lived on the continents of North and South America long before European explorers arrived. Students explore the distinctive cultures of 3 Native American groups and understand that each tribe will have its own way of eating, dressing, and living depending on where they lived. Students will understand how conditions in different geographical regions influence the tribe's cultures, traditions, and their way of life. So when we look at all of the units, the knowledge units for kinder coming up in Q2 side by side, we can see that there will be some connections from one unit to the next. So first in the unit 4, where they're learning all about plants, plant life cycle, plant needs, they will again reinforce their ideas of plants as they look at plants as food sources for animals in the farms unit in unit 5. Another connection that you may see is that the students are practicing the skill of comparing and contrasting in Unit 4, and they will also see that again in the Knowledge Unit 6 when they're comparing and contrasting different Native American tribes. And finally, across all units, you see that students will be expected to write and draw information from the text. So these are just a few of the connections that you may have seen as you're spanning through the Q2 units in knowledge. All right, so looking at an overview of the upcoming skills units, in skills 4, the students will be introduced to 8 new sounds, and through oral language games, chaining exercises, shared reading, and shared reading, students will practice blending these sounds into words. Students also practice previously learned letter sound correspondences. Moving into Skills Unit 5, this will also introduce 8 new sounds. It will include a spelling alternative for the letter K. Through oral language games, chaining exercises, and shared reading, students will practice blending sounds into words, and students will again practice previously learned letter sound correspondences. And finally, in Skills Unit 6, students will automatize the letter sound correspondences and blending procedures that they have learned thus far. They're introduced to consonant clusters in this Skills Unit 6, letter names, rhyming words, and reading text independently.
All right, let's zoom in on the units for first grade. First, let's look at Domain 3, Different Lands, Similar Stories. This domain will introduce students to 3 common themes in fairy tales and folk tales from varying countries and lands that have been told to children for generations. By listening to these stories, students will increase their vocabulary and reading comprehension skills, gain exposure to different places and cultures from around the world, and learn valuable universal lessons. Reading these folk tales and fairy tales will help students develop a strong foundation for their understanding and enjoyment of similar stories from different lands. Then they'll move into Domain 4, Early American Civilizations. Students in this domain will examine the fundamental features of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations, including farming, the establishment of cities and government, and religion. By comparing and contrasting these societies, students will build a foundational understanding of the value and importance of each civilization's achievements and contributions. Additionally, students will learn that much of what we know about the Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations is due to the skill and perseverance of archaeologists. And finally, in Domain 5, students will be learning about astronomy, space exploration. In this introduction to the solar system, students will expand their understanding of the universe and learn that Earth is just one of many different celestial bodies within the solar system. Students will learn how the sun, stars, moon, and other planets relate to the Earth, how the Earth orbits the sun, how the sun is a source of light, heat, and energy, and how the Earth's own rotation on its axis leads to the phenomenon of day and night. In the second half of this domain, students will study the history of space exploration and the missions to the moon, NASA, the space race, the Apollo missions, and what it takes to be an astronaut. So let's look at the connections between each of these units in first grade. First, you can see that students will gain exposure to different places and cultures when they are working in Unit 3. And likewise in Unit 4, they will be looking at the fundamental features of those civilizations, those three main civilizations. Next, in Knowledge 3 and in Knowledge 4, students will be comparing and contrasting. Next, in Unit 4, students will work on identifying important information in a text, as well as in Unit 5. They will also identify important information in a text. In both Units 4 and 5, they will be learning about different careers related to that domain. In Knowledge 4, that is archaeologists, and then in Knowledge 5, they're looking at astronauts. And again, in Knowledge 4 and 5, their students will be completing informational writing. All right, so the skills for first grade in quarter 2 will include finishing up Unit 3 and, finishing up Skills 2, in which we will introduce students to 5 vowel sounds and the most common or least ambiguous spelling for each sound. Students learn to read and write words with separated digraphs, such as the A and the E in cake. These are also known as CVCE words. The unit also includes grammar lessons on nouns, including proper nouns, and student practice with new tricky words. In Skills 3, students are introduced to 5 vowel sounds and the most common spelling for each sound, 5 new tricky words, which are shown on the screen, and the tricky spelling of double O. Grammar exercises focus on identifying verbs and verb tenses, regular, present, past, and future. Students begin formal instruction on the writing process with a focus on narrative writing. Students will also have 4 days of skills lessons in which they are introduced to the most common or least ambiguous sounds or spellings for R-controlled vowels. Students will work with the concepts of syllables and practice reading and working with 2-syllable words. Students will be introduced to past tense verb forms ending with ed as they continue to work with nouns and verbs in phrases. Students are introduced to adjectives as they practice descriptive writing. All right, so let's move into second grade. In second grade, there will be 4 different knowledge domains covered in quarter 2, starting with domain 3, stories from Mount Olympus. Students in this unit will build on their knowledge of ancient Greek culture through exploration of Greek myths and recognize the continuing cultural relevance of these stories in literary allusions, common words, and expressions still used today. Students learn about several Greek gods, including Pandora, Persephone, and Hercules, and their home on Mount Olympus. Students will summarize a Greek myth and practice plot development by creating a character and writing their own fictional narrative in the style of a Greek myth. Next, they cover Domain 4, the War of 1812. This domain will introduce students to an important period in the history of the United States, the War of 1812. Students will learn both why the War of 1812 is often called America's Second War for Independence, and how the United States was affected by the Napoleonic Wars between France and Great Britain. They will learn about James and Dolly Madison, and their direct connection to the War of 1812. Students will learn about Great Britain's three-part plan to win back the United States, including attacks on Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, and the attack on New Orleans in an attempt to gain control of the Mississippi River. Next, they will move into Domain 5, Cycles of Nature, Clouds to Raindrops. In this unit, students will be introduced to cycles of nature as they study seasonal cycles, animal life cycles, and the importance of the water cycle. Students will also learn about the effects seasonal changes have on plants and animals. As students learn that all organisms, including people, experience the developmental stages of the life cycle, they will also begin to understand how all organisms depend on Earth's limited water supply. Students will also write an informational paragraph summarizing the life cycle of a frog. And then finally, we have Domain 6, Westward Expansion. Building on an earlier domain, students continue to study the history of the United States during the time of westward expansion during the 1800s. Students explore why pioneers were willing to endure the hardships to move westward and learn about innovations in transportation and communication, including the steamboat, the Transcontinental Railroad, and the Pony Express. Students also come to understand the hardships and tragedies that Native Americans endured because of westward expansion. Students will practice note-taking skills as they prepare to write an informational text in the format of a westward expansion quilt. All right, let's look at some connections between these 4 units. First, you can see in Knowledge 4, students are looking at an important time in American history in the 1800s, and that is the War of 1812. And then later in Knowledge 6, they're zooming in on westward expansion during that same time period. Also in Unit 4, they will be learning how to and practicing citing text evidence, which they will also do in Knowledge 5. Additionally, in Knowledge 5, they will collect and synthesize information by taking notes. Likewise, they will also take notes in Knowledge 7. They will also write informational texts in both of those last 2 units of Quarter 2, Knowledge 5 and Knowledge 6. All right, let's see what second graders will be doing during Quarter 2 in the Skills strand. First, they will be finishing up Skills Unit 2 before moving into Unit 3 of Skills, in which they will be introduced to spelling alternatives for vowel sounds along with various tricky spellings. Remember, tricky spellings are spellings that can stand for more than one sound. Students will practice writing a personal narrative, while the grammar instruction will focus on capitalization, quotation marks, ending punctuation, and common and proper nouns. Students are also introduced to antonyms and synonyms. In Skills Unit 4, students will be introduced to more spelling alternatives for vowel sounds and 3 tricky spellings. Students practice persuasive writing as part of a friendly letter. In grammar, students review singular and regular plural nouns as well as common and proper nouns. They will be introduced to the formation of irregular plural nouns as well as action verbs and to be verbs. All right, so that brings us to the end of Success Criteria 2.
All right, so now we're going to move into our Success Criteria 3, which is I can identify resources that will help me customize my lessons. So now that you have kind of a general idea of what is coming up in your units, and as you start to plan for your lessons, we want to just give some helpful suggestions on how to navigate through those lessons and help you effectively plan. And so I want to draw your attention first. You may or may not have seen this document, but this is the lesson internalization protocol document that was provided for Amplify by TEA. And essentially, this document outlines three components of lesson internalization. So we're going to simply review the first two steps before we dive into the final step, which is the customization section. And for the purposes of today, that's where we will be spending the majority of our time is in that section. So, in the first step, reviewing the lesson, two big things that should stand out here is that you will want to make sure that you always identify the primary focus objective of the lesson, as well as identify how students will be assessed at the end of the lesson. So, generally, we put some screenshots here for you. Generally, on the introduction page, you can see what that primary focus objective is for the lesson that day. And then you can also see it will either be in the form of an exit pass or maybe some other formative assessment. It will tell you exactly what the student is expected to do. So knowing this ahead of time is going to be essential to kind of moving forward with the lesson and ensuring that your students are able to achieve mastery on that exit pass. So moving into diving into the lesson, this is the second component, and a good place to start with this is by utilizing the lesson at a glance page in the teacher's guide, as it will give you the components that make up the lesson. And so these can vary from lesson to lesson, but it's a good place to start when thinking about which components may need additional engagement strategies noted. Maybe by now you have kind of an overview of where your students are at, maybe things that they struggle with. And so kind of thinking about these components ahead of time, where might I need to make some adjustments? It's also a great time to think about areas where we might want to mark some additional student support for our diverse learners. So today, for our session, we're going to take time to really look into this third component of the lesson internalization protocol, and that is customizing the lesson. So you may or may not have been told, but we are here to tell you today that you do have the ability to customize the Amplify lessons to best fit the needs of your students. As a matter of fact, we are highly encouraging it. So first, I want to draw your attention to the advanced preparation section of the teacher's guide. This section is going to give suggestions on how to make each component comprehensible to all learners. So this can be through the use of sentence stems, maybe some conversations that are provided, or any additional activities that are really going to help students build some background knowledge and make those connections. If your school is new to Amplify, you may or may not know that the units do connect, or I'm sorry, the grade levels do connect. So if for some reason they weren't doing Amplify in the year prior, they may not already have that background knowledge from that unit. And so that's why paying attention to this page can be really helpful to make sure that we're giving them those necessary pieces to make those connections. In addition, the lesson will have challenge sidebars that can be given to students who are ready to go beyond the original lesson. These are just some of the things that are embedded in the curriculum to help give teachers an idea of how to support their students at all levels. So some key things to note here first are that we really want to consider which questions are necessary to ask in the lesson to support student understanding, as well as prepare them for how they will be assessed. So do we need to ask them all of the questions as we're reading to them? Can some be removed to save some time? Can some be adjusted? So as you're going through the lesson and you're trying to customize, that's one area to start, is by looking through your read aloud and looking at your discussion and seeing, can there be some questions that maybe for the purposes of what needs to be done, we don't have to use those questions. So you do not have to ask every single question. Another area to note is that when thinking about our diverse learners, where might we need to mark areas where scaffolds are necessary? So maybe you're looking at something ahead of time and you're like, this seems a little complex. I might need to make some notes about adjustments. This is really going to help with your pacing when you have those notes already there because you've gone through and internalized the lesson. What about students who seem to be getting it? Where can we mark opportunities for extension? Again, a lot of times these are embedded in the curriculum, not always, but for the most part, they are there. And then finally, looking ahead at the application activity towards the end of the lesson, how might we need to make some adjustments for specific groups of learners? So really what we mean by customizing is just kind of going through and making these adjustments, notes ahead of time so that you're ready to go and your lessons can flow smoothly and help keep you on your pacing. Okay, I see that there are a few teachers in the waiting room. Jill, I don't know if you saw that. All right.
Thank you.
So before we make customizations, let's think about what this process might look like. So we're going to relate this to a new recipe that you might be wanting to try. So imagine you got this new recipe. What are you going to do? Well, the first thing that I have to do is I have to read through it very carefully. I have to visualize the steps. I have to think about the ingredients. And then I make sure that I can do all the cooking skills and that I have the right cookware. So if there's a skill in there that I might not know, I might search up a YouTube video or whatever's going to help kind of build that knowledge for me for those skills. Then I'm going to look through my pantry and my refrigerator to see, do I already have some ingredients available that I can use? If so, is there enough or do I need to get more? Then I make a list of ingredients that I'm going to need from the store and I go grocery shopping. Some items are quick grabs and others I need to read the nutritional information and make sure I'm choosing the best products for my dish. When it's time to cook, I'll gather all of the ingredients, utensils, pots and pans so that they're ready and available for right when I need them. The first time I try a recipe, I usually go step by step and I try not to improvise too much. And when it's finally time to eat, I usually evaluate whether I liked it or not. I think about little tweaks I might make next time if I make this dish, and then I might make those notes on the recipe cards so I don't forget the changes I might want to make. And if I make the recipe again, I will know I need a little more of this or a little less of this to make it more to my liking. So this is very similar to what we're trying to do with our Amplify lessons. And so if you haven't figured it out by now, your new recipe is from Amplify. So take a look at this recipe from an Amplify lesson. So for today, we're focusing on a second grade lesson called The War of 1812. And we're going to go over some of these ingredients today so that your classroom is cooking. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when preparing the lesson, again, is to read it carefully, visualize it, internalize it, just like you would a recipe. Look at those components, kind of see everything that's going to get working together. Which areas might you need to plan for a little more intently? In Amplify, you'll want to read the text and the lesson at a glance. You'll want to review the TEKS and what materials are already provided or what you might need to gather as an additional resource. Then you want to start thinking about how you're going to deliver the lesson. Consider the activities or those components in the lesson at a glance as ingredients that you might want to pay closer attention to the nutritional information. Which components are going to hold more nutritional value over others? Which are essential to the success of the recipe or lesson? So again, which are going to be essential to that application piece at the end that we know students are going to have to be able to complete? Which are the salt, the baking soda, so to speak? And next, we're going to go to the lessons clarity document. So we showed you that earlier, which are linked on their IPCs for convenience. These are going to be your quick grab items because they can easily be added to your lesson internalization like a can of beans you grab from your pantry. So when it comes to customization, you may want to follow the program as it is at this point, Or you may need to add supports or adjust a portion that seems repetitive based on your students' needs or tastes. So chop, mince, and caramelize. In other words, utilize your best teaching practices. Now, another platform that we have to kind of assist you with engagement strategies for your lessons is the elevation strategies. So this can assist in additional supports. They're going to provide practical ways to differentiate instruction for specific students across all your content areas. And they're also going to provide some instructional activities. So depending upon what your engagement purposes are, the playlist might change. And so when you look at this slide, each purpose has a catalog of activities or strategies that you can choose from. For example, this table shows activities that you might use if you wanted to fortify output. We're going to take a pause here for a minute, and we're going to drop a link to the elevation playlist for you to kind of browse around and see what are some of the resources that are available to you and what might they look like. So I'm just going to set a timer for about 4 to 5 minutes so that you can browse this spreadsheet. So we're dropping that, in the chat for you now. All right, so it's been dropped in the chat for you. If you have any troubles accessing it, let us know. And again, I will set a 5-minute timer and we'll come back to discuss. All right, we'll take about 1 more minute. All right. Well, I am going to bring us back together just to make sure that we do honor your time today. And so hopefully as you were looking through this playlist, you kind of got some ideas of some strategies that you can incorporate that might help build that student engagement piece in your lessons. So what we're going to do now is all of the things that we discussed with you as far as customizing the lesson, what it might look like to make those notes or adjustments. We're going to actually show you an exemplar of what that would look like as notes in your teacher's guide.
All right, so we're going to look at an example of how a teacher has taken a recipe or a lesson from Amplify and written notes to indicate areas that may require adjustments or highlight areas for additional support. This first page is an example of an annotated lesson from grade 2 Knowledge 4, the War of 1812. You can see on the first page of a lesson, you can see the first page of the lesson on the left-hand side of the screen. Notice how it's evident that the teacher thought about the connections between the primary focuses of the lesson and how they're connected to the TEKS. And you can see those notes in blue. You can also see that the teacher has written notes in pinkish red about the big ideas of the lesson and how those tie into the importance of the overall unit. Now, if we look at a page in the lesson, we can see how the teacher's written brief notes about each section. Also, we can notice how she's provided more engagement opportunities for her students by indicating other places where she can stop to make sure that students are understanding the content. She's written differentiated directions for her students based on their achievement levels. Also, she's added a note to ask students a question to make the content more relevant to their lives. Here we can see that the teacher has boxed the important vocabulary words that students need to know to be successful on the unit assessment. She also rewrote some of the turn and talk questions to align with her own students and their needs. On the exit pass for this lesson, we see that the teacher has answered the question. This can serve as an exemplar when looking at student work. The teacher can also think about what scaffolds individual students may need in order to be successful. For example, some students may need to order this question orally, while other students, such as emergent bilinguals, may benefit from using sentence stems. All right, so to wrap up our session for today, we want to share our office hours and contact information with you. If you are not aware, Reading Language Arts is offering office hours twice every week. So K-2 has office hours from 3:30 to 5 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday, and you can register for that through the Cornerstone links on this slide. And we are working on pasting a link to this flyer or this spreadsheet in the chat. So you can, if you want to come to an office hours meeting, we invite you to do so. It's an informal meeting where you can come and ask questions to the RLA coordinators, any questions you have about Amplify or questions that you might have about upcoming trainings, anything you need. Just come in and ask your questions at your convenience, and then you can leave once your questions have been answered. So again, this is every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, and you'll need to register in Cornerstone to get those links. And the spreadsheet with that information has been put into the chat for you. And then we'd also like to share our team information with you. This is the entire Reading Language Arts team. You can always reach us at the bit.ly that is at the bottom right of the screen. Also on here are our names, our phone numbers, and our email addresses. Lisa and I primarily work with kindergarten, first and second grade. So we're the ones that you'll want to reach out to with your specific questions about those grade levels, but you're welcome to reach out to anyone here on this team. Please don't forget that we invite you to join us for office hours. And if you have any other questions, we welcome your emails and your phone calls as well. So good luck with quarter 2. Thanks again for joining us.